We didn't hear the bulldozer at first. What we heard was Grandpa cursing like a sailor who stubbed his toe on the edge of the Constitution and the sharp, unmistakable crack of vinyl snapping like a lie under pressure. That fence didn't just break, it confessed. It gave up the moment it met the front blade of a 1968 bulldozer named Mabel and a man who'd had enough. By the time I looked out the window, Grandpa Gus was already halfway down the driveway, balanced on that rusty beast like some war-torn general, blade raised not in anger, but in something far more dangerous, calm resolve. You don't ignore that kind of silence in a man. You lean in because something's about to change. Let me back up. This wasn't just about a fence. It was about who draws the lines and who gets erased by them. The day the Briarfield HOA planted that 6-foot white vinyl monument to suburban tyranny right across our only road out, they didn't just block traffic, they declared war. And not some dramatic, explosive war. No. This was a slow, suffocating war, waged by people who weaponize bylaws and smile while doing it. If you've ever lived near one of those people, the kind who calls the city because your mailbox leans half an inch to the left, you know the kind of war I'm talking about. We live on the edge of town, Jenkins Farm, just past where the gravel gets serious and the GPS gets nervous. For decades, that gravel road had been ours. Not just legally, we've got papers somewhere buried under a stack of coffee-stained county maps, but spiritually, my dad learned to ride a bike on that road. I learned to drive stick on that road. And Grandpa Gus, he laid it with his own hands, poured sweat into it like cement. So when a group of polo-shirted HOA contractors showed up one morning with measuring tapes and clipboards, parked their spotless utility van across from our mailbox, and started hammering stakes into the earth like they were planting flags on conquered land, something inside Grandpa shifted. I didn't understand it at first. I thought they had the wrong address. I ran inside, barefoot, dust still on my heels, and told Grandpa they're putting up a fence. He didn't even blink, just chewed the end of an unlit cigar and said they're fencing me out. That's all he said. Flat, final, like he was reading the weather. I didn't get it. Not then. But by sundown, our road, our lifeline, was gone. Walled off by a pristine, ridiculous HOA certified white vinyl fence with no gate, no gap, and no damn explanation. It looked like the set of a movie about quiet repression, picture-perfect panels glowing like a suburban halo, hiding the fact that it cut us off from the store, the post office, the world. We weren't notified. No emails, no letters. Not even a knock on the door. Like we were props in their curated reality, too messy to include in the neighborhood brochure. We called, left voicemails, emailed, nothing, no response. And maybe if they just said, oops, wrong property, it could have ended there. But silence? Silence is where bad decisions go to breed. That's when Grandpa walked into the garage, ran his hands along the dusty, dormant frame of Mabel, and said the words that still echo in my chest. I reckon it's time she took a walk. You ever hear a bulldozer wake up after 2 decades of sleep? It's not a sound you forget. It's like a dragon with arthritis trying to remember how to breathe fire. The house shook. Our cat bolted. Birds fled the trees. I was still brushing my teeth when I ran outside, foam dripping from my chin, just in time to see Gus push that lever forward and aim Mabel straight at the fence. There was no hesitation. Just this quiet, stubborn determination that said, no more. She devoured it. Vinyl snapped, screws flew, and somewhere in town I'm convinced someone in a khaki blazer dropped their kale smoothie in slow motion. And Grandpa? He didn't flinch. Just sat there, squinting, chewing that cigar stub like it owed him rent, while panels exploded around him like ticker tape in a ticker tape parade for the damned. Because sometimes the only way to make people see what's been stolen is to make some noise. Loud, messy, unforgettable noise. And Grandpa, he was noise incarnate. You might think the cops showed up, or that we got fined or dragged into some HOA kangaroo court. But nah, it was just the first round. By breakfast, I'd posted the video online, Grandpa versus Fence, round one, and before the eggs were cold, it had 50,000 views. By lunch, 100,000. And by dinner, national reporters were calling, not for commentary, for confirmation. Because what they saw wasn't a crime. It was a reckoning. And Gus? He didn't want interviews. Didn't want fame. I didn't do it for clicks, he said. I did it for the road. But the HOA? Oh, they were pissed. We found a letter duct taped to our chicken coop that night, in cursive so passive-aggressive it practically sighed. Cease and desist. Legal action. Expulsion. But here's the kicker. We were never home members. Never signed their covenants. Never paid their dues. But they'd redrawn the maps. Slowly, subtly, absorbing nearby land like a creeping mold in a Tupperware fridge. That night, Grandpa sat in the barn, oiling Mabel like she was a warhorse. Said nothing for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "They think they can fence us out of our lives." But they forgot something. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled that crooked Jenkins smile. "I built the map." And that was it. The moment I understood. This wasn't about property lines. It wasn't about zoning overlays or green space or any of the words ho folks hide behind. It was about dignity, about memory, about standing your damn ground when someone tries to pave over everything you've lived and worked for. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you've watched a place you love get carved up and commodified by people who've never dirted their hands there. Maybe you've seen history reduced to a regulation. And maybe, just maybe, there's a Mabel in your barn too, waiting for a reason to roar. That morning, Grandpa took Mabel for another walk. And this time, I walked with him. Not because I'm reckless. Not because I hate rules. Not because I hate rules, but because I believe in something more important than rules. I believe in right, in roots, and remembering where you came from. And sometimes the only way to protect that is to push back, even if the blade's a little rusty, even if the gravel shakes your bones, even if the whole world thinks you're just some old man yelling at clouds. Because maybe, just maybe, what you're really doing is showing everyone else that the sky belongs to us too. And fences? Fences are just invitations for the brave. The thing about small towns is that nothing stays quiet for long, not even a war between a grandfather and a fence. By the time the sun rose the next day, the video had spread like a prairie fire on a windy day. Not just across Briarfield, but far beyond. We hadn't even finished buttering our toast when a neighbor knocked to ask if Grandpa was giving interviews. Then another came by just to shake his hand. Then came a pair of 20-somethings from a podcast with names like Rust and Rebellion. They brought kombucha, thinking that might sweeten him up. It didn't. Grandpa refused every camera and microphone. "I didn't start this for likes," he muttered. "I started it because I needed eggs and couldn't get to the damn store." But the more he turned them down, the more the story grew. The internet saw in Grandpa not just a stubborn old man with a bulldozer, but something primal, something honest. He didn't try to explain himself with polished PR lines or moral platitudes. He just drove a rusted-out beast through a wall someone shouldn't have put there. It resonated. Men my grandfather's age, men with sun-thickened skin and decades of calloused experience, started sharing it like gospel. One comment said, "That's how you reclaim a road." Another said, "This is what they've forgotten. That land means something." Every click, every view was a match tossed into dry grass. The Briarfield HOA, on the other hand, wasn't laughing. That evening, a new letter arrived, not in the mailbox, but duct-taped again to our chicken coop. Cursive handwriting like the last one, only this time with bold underlines and legal threats worded just soft enough to sound polite and just sharp enough to feel like a blade. Further acts of demolition, it warned, may result in legal seizure, revocation of property privileges, and expulsion from the Briarfield Community Charter. Grandpa read it out loud while feeding the hens, then used the letter to line the nesting box. "They can't expel someone who was never invited," he said. "Besides, no chicken respects a tyrant." That's when I realized this wasn't just going to be a fight about the fence. This was going to be about territory, real and symbolic, about who belonged and who didn't. The HOA saw us as an outdated blip, a family barnacle clinging to the hull of their tidy ship. They didn't just want to build fences. They wanted to scrub us out of the picture entirely. Make us vanish beneath landscaping guidelines and zoning overlays and passive-aggressive newsletters that called for community cohesion while slicing the very soul out of the land they claimed to beautify. The next morning, the town of Briarfield buzzed like a hive of bees wearing loafers and name tags. The video had become a Rorschach test. Some saw civil disobedience, others saw criminal mischief. Most just saw something they couldn't look away from. Grandpa Gus was suddenly a folk hero. People started leaving muffins on the fence posts. First it was one or two, then a whole row of baked rebellion, blueberry, banana nut, even a scone with solidarity written in icing. And yet, through all of this, the HOA doubled down. Not just one fence, two. They came at dawn in silence, erected twin walls on either side of the first one. It was no longer just a barricade. It was a white vinyl gauntlet, a maze of malicious urban planning. You couldn't get to the mailbox without performing a low-budget version of a Minotaur myth. One neighbor joked we should start charging admission. Another suggested painting escape route arrows and calling it modern art. Grandpa didn't flinch. He said, "If they want a maze, I'll give them a myth." And he did. What followed can only be described as peaceful sabotage. Every morning he drove Mabel in a slow, precise lap around the perimeter of the vinyl monstrosity. He mounted an old megaphone and played polka music from the 70s. Not loud, just annoying enough to fray nerves. He honked 3 times, once for defiance, once for the Constitution, and once just for Constance Merriweather's scowl. Neighbors waved. Some saluted. The muffins kept multiplying. Then came the HOA's next volley. A new ordinance rushed through in an emergency board meeting. Effective immediately, no motorized farm equipment was permitted within 300 feet of any HOA-managed boundary. Grandpa received an official citation for unauthorized gravel disturbance and a violation notice for unaesthetic soil activity. They called it the Mabel Clause. We called it nonsense. I tried to argue with them at the community center, but Constance, sitting like an ice sculpture behind a folding table, barely looked up. "As of June," she said with a thin smile, "the zoning overlay reclassifies your access road as a communal buffer zone for visual harmony." Visual harmony. They turned our driveway into a mood board. When I brought the news back to Grandpa, he didn't curse. He just laughed. A low, gravel-throated wheeze that echoed through the barn. "Girl," he said, "I once rebuilt a bridge in Vietnam using 2 hubcaps, a cow chain, and a wedding arch. I'm not losing to a mood board." That night, he mowed the lawn using Mabel in passive-aggressive crop circles. First it was words, fence this, then land of the free, and finally a rather impressive drawing of a middle finger made entirely from rows of kale. A drone caught it. Local media dubbed it Veggie Vengeance. Grandpa just called it gardening. But something else started to change too. Quietly, subtly. People stopped treating us like relics. They started treating us like a front line, the kind you rally behind. The bakery started giving us free loaves. A kid from the high school art class asked to paint Grandpa's portrait on the side of the barn. It wasn't perfect, but it had heart. And the eyes? The eyes had fire. Still, underneath the laughter and the spectacle, something darker was moving. One morning, I received a message from an unknown number. No name. Just a blurry photo of a crumpled envelope in a map corner. The text read, "I know where the original deed is. Meet me behind the library at midnight. Don't tell Gus." I didn't. Not at first. Something about that warning clung to me like a burr. Grandpa had spent his whole life fighting things he could see: bridges, fences, engines. This was different. This was shadow work. Paper battles. lines redrawn without ink, and part of me, maybe the part I inherited from him, wanted to see what they were hiding. At midnight, I slipped out with a flashlight and the photo burned into my phone. The back of the town library smelled like mulch and forgotten stories. I expected a trench coat, maybe a fake mustache. What I found was Carlton Brubaker, the HOA's own attorney, crouched behind the compost bin with panic in his eyes. "You're early," he whispered. "You're a lawyer," I said. "Unfortunately," he replied, handing me the deed. It was real. Yellowed edges. My great-grandfather's signature like a thunderclap across the page. Pre-annexation. Pre-everything. Untouchable. "Why now?" I asked. Carlton looked tired. "Because I can't sleep knowing we're using decorative shrubbery to erase war veterans. Also, Constance is planning something worse. Eminent domain. She wants to level the ridge, build a luxury wellness retreat. Meditation yurts. Goat yoga. Your farm's in the way." He asked me not to tell Grandpa. If you do, he said, he might drive Mabel through town hall. And honestly, that would be awesome. But I'd like to keep my license. I didn't sleep much that night, because now I knew. The fence wasn't the war, it was the opening move, and we were just getting started. There's a strange quiet that comes the night after you learn your land is under threat. It's not peaceful. It's the kind of quiet that vibrates under your skin, like the stillness before a storm or a snake coiled in tall grass. That night, I lay awake with the original deed tucked beneath the floorboard, my heart thumping with equal parts anger and purpose. The truth was heavier than I expected. Knowing the land had always been ours didn't feel like vindication. It felt like ammunition. And something inside me, something old and sharp and Jenkins, knew that we were going to need it. I didn't tell Grandpa. Not yet. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I knew what he'd do. He'd fire up Mabel again, march straight into the courthouse, and dare them to stop him. And for once, we needed strategy more than spectacle. What I didn't count on was the knock at our front door the next morning. It was early, sun barely lifting over the ridge, dew still heavy on the grass. Grandpa was out back adjusting Mabel's treads with the patience of a man who believes bolts have feelings. I opened the door and found a kid standing there, tallish, lanky, awkward in that way only teenagers can be, with a backpack that looked like it contained either textbooks or a small planet. He had curly hair, wide eyes, and a hesitation in his stance, like he wasn't sure which direction was safe. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I think I might be your cousin." "Maybe. I think I'm Grandpa's grandson." The world tilted just a little. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "My name's Micah. My mom was Rachel Callahan from Minnesota." The name hit like a forgotten song. Rachel. A name Grandpa hadn't spoken in decades. A woman who once sent letters in handwriting so neat it looked like it had been printed from the heart. A woman who vanished north after a brief, intense flicker in Grandpa's widowed years. I turned to call out for Gus, but he was already walking up behind me, wrench in hand, eyes narrowing with suspicion sharpened by age. "What's going on here?" he asked. Micah's voice was steady now. "I think you're my grandfather." Grandpa froze. Not in fear. He was too old for that. It was more like someone had flipped a switch and short-circuited his operating system. He stared at the boy, at the face that looked a little too much like his own at 17. Then he spoke one word, soft and stunned. "Rachel." Micah nodded. "She passed away last year." "I found letters. From you." I read them all. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with decades of what-ifs and should-haves and love that never got to become routine. Gus stepped back like the past had just walked through the door and punched him in the gut. For the first time in a long time, he looked small. We brought Micah inside, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table like characters in a soap opera set on a farm, except nobody was yelling and the only scandal was love lost and found. Micah talked about his life, growing up with a single mom who refused to badmouth the man she'd once loved, about the letters, dozens, unopened, yellowed with time, about the choice to come find us after she passed. He wasn't here for money. He wasn't angry. He just wanted to know where he came from. Grandpa didn't say much at first. He's never been a man for words when tools will do. But I watched him as Micah spoke. Saw his jaw clench then soften. Saw him run a hand through his thinning hair like it might help him catch up to time. After dinner, he pulled me aside. "You okay with this?" he asked. I nodded. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window at the barn, at the ridge beyond it, at the land that had carried every version of him, son, husband, father, fighter, builder, and now, unexpectedly, grandfather again. "Life gives you second chances when you're old enough to know what you missed the first time," he said. Be a damn fool to waste it. The next morning, a new notice appeared, stapled to a tree like we were wanted outlaws. The HOA had filed for legal control of our access road. Eminent domain was no longer rumor. It was real, printed in black ink, official as it gets. They wanted to pave paradise and replace it with yoga domes and a juice bar. Grandpa read it, folded it neatly, and placed it under a loose barn plank like a dead animal. "Should have bulldozed their clubhouse when I had the chance," he muttered. Micah stood beside him. "What if we don't need Mabel this time?" And just like that, a new idea took root. Micah wasn't just blood. He was a bridge. He knew tech, knew how to scan the deed, digitize it, upload it to cloud storage, file it with the county before the HOA could even sharpen their pencils. He had the fire of a Jenkins and the tools of a new world. For the first time, Grandpa looked at someone younger than him and didn't see threat or softness. He saw a weapon forged in both love and logic. We got to work. While the HOA spun up their lawyers and polished their brochures, we scanned maps, pulled satellite overlays, emailed sympathetic clerks, filed affidavits. Carlton Brubaker, ever the conflicted coward, continued feeding us intel through burner phones and late-night compost bin meetings. At one point, Micah and I found a county document buried deep online, signed and dated back in 1962, confirming the Jenkins easement as permanent and grandfathered. It was game-changing. It was evidence. But more than that, it was validation. Meanwhile, Grandpa and Mabel played the long game. Every morning he mowed inspirational messages into the field using radishes, corn stalks, and pure unfiltered spite. "We were here first," read one. "Zoning can't erase roots," read another. My personal favorite was a rather anatomically accurate drawing of a goat stomping on a clipboard. HOA members started driving by just to see what would appear next. It became its own form of protest art. People stopped mocking us. They started watching, listening, supporting. And maybe that's when the HOA began to panic. Because you can fence off a driveway. But you can't fence off an idea whose time has come. Especially not when that idea is riding a bulldozer with kale in its teeth. We knew the final fight was coming. But this time, we weren't standing alone. We had Micah. We had history. We had the damn deed. And we had a community slowly waking up to the realization that order without justice is just quiet tyranny. One night, over leftover meatloaf and a pile of legal printouts, Micah asked Grandpa, "If they come again, really come, what do we do?" Grandpa leaned back, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Then we walk the road together, with papers in our hands and truth under our feet. And if they still won't listen," he smiled, "well, we've still got Mabel." And that's how it was decided. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. Just not the kind they expected. Not chaos. Not rage. Not violence. Something worse. Proof. Patience. Purpose. And a family too damn stubborn to be erased. They came just after dawn, not in silence, but with the smug hum of government-grade tires and the plastic hiss of high-visibility vests. Karen Flax, newly self-declared queen of HOA hell, had upgraded from snide emails and passive-aggressive lawn citations to something bolder. This time it was official. County trucks, clipboard squads, a camera crew wearing matching branded fleeces that looked too clean to be local. They parked across from the chicken coop like they were filming a nature documentary about the last days of a dying species. Grandpa didn't flinch. He just poured his coffee, flipped the bacon, and muttered, "They brought costumes to a truth fight." I was halfway through lacing my boots when Micah ran in, tablet in hand, eyes wide with both fear and something more dangerous, determination. "They're not just surveying," he said. "They're marking demolition boundaries." He turned the screen toward us, showed us the drone footage he'd intercepted through a local wildlife feed. Yeah, the boy hacked into bird cam. Red tape flagged every corner of our orchard. The barn, the ridge trail, even Mabel's resting spot had been tagged. Karen wasn't bluffing anymore. She was declaring war with bureaucratic smiles and precision-engineered bulldozers that probably came with customer support. Grandpa chewed his toast like it was a piece of barbed wire. "That woman thinks she can erase me with colored string." He stood up slowly, like a mountain learning to walk again. "Get the deed." I didn't argue. I ran to my room, pulled up the floorboard, and grabbed the frame. The original land deed, not a copy. Signed in ink that looked angry even after half a century. We didn't dress up. We didn't rehearse speeches. We walked side by side, 3 generations, 1 document, and a truth too old to crumble. We crossed the gravel road like it was a battlefield. Karen saw us coming and didn't even blink. She wore a peach pantsuit and heels too sharp for farmland. She was surrounded by a new board, fresh faces, smooth hands, and a glint in their eyes that said they'd never lost a fight worth remembering. "Ah," she said, clipboard tucked under her arm like a sheriff's badge. "The Jenkins delegation. Here to protest again?" Grandpa handed her the deed without a word. She flipped through it unimpressed until she saw the seal. The real seal. County notarized. Signed by a man whose name was etched into the cornerstone of Briarfield's courthouse. "This proves nothing," she said, but her voice cracked, just a little. "This proves everything," I replied. "You can't seize land that's never been yours. You can't pave over memory with a permit." Karen's lip twitched. "We have development rights." "You had assumptions," Grandpa snapped, "and those are about to be corrected." One of the clipboard crew stepped forward, young, pale, jittery. "Miss Flax, they're right." "If this deed holds," she silenced him with a look that could sterilize a rooster. "Keep flagging. Let the courts sort it." That's when Grandpa laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-throated, wheezy, defiant belly laugh that made every camera turn, every clipboard hesitate. "You think this ends in court?" he said. "Lady, this ends with the people you forgot to fear." By noon, word had spread. Neighbors who once peeked through blinds started showing up. Old farmers, teachers, teenagers on skateboards. One guy from the gas station brought folding chairs and popcorn. Nobody said the word protest, but that's what it became. Not with chants or signs. With presence. With patience. With a shared stare that said, "No more." Karen retreated by sundown, but not before posting a new notice. Public hearing, 48 hours, mandatory attendance. They were escalating. So were we. That night, the barn became our war room. Grandpa laid out maps. Micah wired up a live stream. I started digging through town records with the kind of focus only righteous fury can fuel. And that's when we found it. A line item in an old budget report, consultant fees for project pre-approval. Cross-referenced, it led to an invoice. Cross-referenced again, it led to a name Karen's cousin paid as a zoning expert 3 weeks before the Serenity Project was even proposed. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was an open fire. The next morning, we made copies, sent them to local news, slipped them into mailboxes, posted them on the town bulletin board, right between the lost cat ad and someone selling slightly haunted furniture. Karen called it slander. We called it proof. The hearing wasn't held at the community center. Too small. They moved it to the high school gym, and still people overflowed onto the lawn. I stood beside Grandpa and Micah, the original deed in one hand, the invoice in the other. Karen opened the meeting with her usual smile, tight, practiced, brittle. "We are gathered to discuss community cohesion," she said. "We are gathered," I interrupted, "to stop a lie from becoming concrete." Gasps. Murmurs. Someone from the back yelled, "Let her speak." And for once, nobody shushed them. I laid it all out. The fake zoning, the secret payments, the bulldozer threats, the generational theft hidden behind the language of beautification. And then I handed the mic to Grandpa. He didn't read from notes. He didn't posture. He just told the truth about the orchard, the road, the silence after war, and the peace you build with calloused hands, about Rachel and the boy who found his family by walking into a storm. "You don't need to like me," he said. "You damn well better respect what came before your blueprints." When he finished, the room didn't cheer. It rose, slowly, one by one, a standing quiet that meant more than applause ever could. Karen didn't fight, not out loud, but I saw her face. She knew. We'd shifted something. The vote was delayed. The flags came down. And for the first time, the gravel under my boots didn't feel like a path to loss. It felt like home again. That night, we didn't celebrate. We sat around the kitchen table eating leftovers, passing around a jug of cider, and saying nothing because everything had already been said. Outside, Mabel stood silent. She didn't need to roll again. Her message was written in every seed we'd sown, every footstep we'd taken. And we weren't done. Not yet. Because land isn't just land. It's memory. And no matter how many fences they raise, we remember how to tear them down. The winter came late that year, but when it came, it didn't tiptoe. It stormed in like it owned the place, whined like a switchblade, ice thick enough to freeze the bones of a memory. But the ground held, the farm stood, and Grandpa's coffee still tasted like resistance brewed in a tin pot older than the town charter. We thought maybe we'd earn peace. After the hearing, after the standing room only showdown where Karen Flax was finally forced to blink, there was a lull, the kind of silence that feels too clean. Karen stepped back from the spotlight, retreated to her house at the end of Dahlia Lane with its imported rose hedges and seasonal front porch pillows. The county paused the Serenity Project pending ethical review. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet. Grandpa didn't trust it. "When snakes go still," he said, "it means they're digesting or planning to bite again." Micah kept busy repairing the irrigation system. I got accepted into an internship at the planning commission in the city. Ironic, considering how deep we were in a war with planners. Grandpa didn't say much about that, but one morning he slipped a folded map into my coat pocket before I left for the bus. It had two markings, the Jenkins Ridge and a coffee shop 3 blocks from the commissioner's office. "Know the land, know your ground," he said, "even when you're not standing on it." But we should have known Karen wasn't finished. She wasn't licking her wounds. She was buying time. And by February, her next move rolled in like a blizzard with a legal brief. It wasn't the county this time. It was private. A developer, Van Slyke Holdings. LLC, a shadow with a budget. They bought the lots surrounding ours, every single one, and filed for a private easement cut straight through Jenkins land using a clause so old it was written on a typewriter. They called it progressive realignment for communal benefit. I called it snake oil in a necktie. Grandpa read the notice once and fed it to the wood stove. "You know what kind of man uses a loophole to steal your front yard?" he asked. "The kind that's afraid of knocking on the door." Within a week, they'd started marking trees again. Survey stakes, pink flags. We pulled them up each morning, and they reappeared every night. The farm turned into a chessboard with no rules. That's when Micah had the idea. "They want to redraw maps," he said. Let's give them something they can't erase. And so we turned the land into a story no lawyer could untangle. We started with the orchard, planted new trees in patterns, geometric rows that spelled no trespassing when seen from above. We converted the barn into a makeshift community center. Grandpa called it the Grange 2.0 and invited every neighbor who'd ever lost a flower bed to zoning code to come tell their story. By spring, the Jenkins farm had become a living protest. Kids came to learn about tractors. Old-timers came to drink cider and complain about modern fences. Tourists showed up with cameras, wanting a picture next to the world's sassiest bulldozer. And all the while, Van Slyke's machines waited, humming just beyond the property line like wolves with permits. Then came the mail. Not certified, why not stamped. Just slipped under the door like a threat, pretending to be polite. A new offer. Cash. 6 figures. To resolve the tension amicably. Grandpa read it and laughed so hard he nearly choked on his biscuit. They think I'm going to sell my story for hush money, he said. Girl, they're going to have to outbid my memories. I posted the letter online. It went viral again. Hashtags, memes, even a song parody. Micah made t-shirts. One said, I break for bureaucrats. Another had Mabel with flames behind her and the caption, make fences flinch. We sold out in a week. That's when the sabotage started. First, someone cut the main irrigation line. Then the fence around the chicken coop mysteriously collapsed. Our mailbox got smashed. Once. Then again. And then filled with gravel. Petty crimes. No fingerprints, but loud enough to feel like warnings. Grandpa didn't blink. He welded a new mailbox, solid steel, shaped like a middle finger. Let him sue me for expression, he said. But I could tell it was wearing on him. Not the damage, the erosion. The way it creeps in when your fight keeps getting rebranded as a dispute. One night I found him in the barn, staring at Mabel, not talking, not moving, just resting his hand on her frame like he was trying to remember why it all started. You okay? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then I miss when we fought things we could see. That's when I decided we needed more than resistance. We needed a fence. I filed a historical land status request with the state. Dug up records, took photos, got affidavits. Micah ran a campaign. We pitched the Jenkins farm as a cultural site, a living monument to rural resilience. People signed. 1,000 names. Then 2. Then a senator visited. She didn't say much, just walked the land, touched the trees, nodded. But a week later, the status was approved. Jenkins Farm, official state heritage site. That meant no development, no private roads, no Van Slyke holding anything but regrets. We framed the certificate and nailed it to the barn wall. That should have been the end, but Karen wasn't finished. She couldn't stand losing. Not to Grandpa, not to us. So she went scorched earth. Her final act wasn't legal. It was theatrical. She organized a wellness festival on the neighboring plot, invited influencers, hired a drone show, loud music, full meditation sessions with rented goats and neon tents. They positioned it right on the ridge, just outside our line. It was a distraction, a celebration built on spite. The night before it launched, I found Grandpa back in the barn, oiling Mabel again. She hadn't moved in months. She was rusted, tired. But he cleaned her like she was about to give a speech. You thinking of crashing a party? I asked. He shook his head. Not this time. That's not our job anymore. The next morning, the festival started. Loudspeakers, merch booths. But by noon, the crowd had thinned, because something better was happening next door. The real story. Folks wandered off the festival grounds, past the do not enter signs, and into our orchard. No invitation, no price tag. Just curiosity. By sunset, more people stood on our ridge than on hers, listening to Grandpa talk about soil, watching Micah lead kids through the barn, standing in line for apple pie. We didn't throw a festival. We held the land, and the land held him back. The county revoked Van Slyke's project permit 3 days later. Karen resigned for health reasons. We sent her a care package, cider, radish seeds, and a map. No note. Just one line scribbled in Sharpie. Respect the roots. Grandpa never said the war was over. But that night, for the first time in months, he slept without boots on. Micah planted new kale. I started writing again, not to fight, to remember. Because sometimes winning doesn't look like victory. It looks like staying, holding, growing again, in soil that tried to forget you but couldn't. Because you were always there, with boots and maps, and the kind of story they can't bulldoze.